I spent 40 years enforcing zoning laws and inspecting foundations in Washington state. I know that a house is only as strong as the ground it sits on. My nephew Justin looked at my lakefront cottage and saw a gold mine. I looked at him and saw a structural failure waiting to collapse. He told me he was taking over. He told me I would live in the shed. He told me to be grateful. I did not argue. I did not yell. I simply poured my coffee and waited. Because Justin did not know that the ground beneath his feet, the road he drove in on, and the very pipes he was about to overload belonged to me in ways a title deed does not show. He wanted to run a business. I was about to give him a masterclass in bankruptcy. Before I tell you how I dismantled his life brick by brick, please like and subscribe if you believe that respecting your elders is not optional. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The morning the war began, Lake Crescent was perfectly still. The fog was lifting off the water, revealing the deep, cold blue that I had worked my entire life to wake up to. I sat on the end of my dock, my boots dangling just above the water, a mug of black coffee warming my hands. It was 7 a.m. This was the time my late wife, Patricia, loved the most. I could almost hear her voice telling me to put on a jacket. I was 72 years old. I had a paid-off mortgage, a bad knee, and finally, silence. Then my phone buzzed. It was Justin. I did not answer immediately. Justin was my sister's son, a 32-year-old man who spoke in buzzwords and lived on credit. He called me Uncle Wally, but his tone always carried the impatient condescension of someone speaking to a slow child. I pressed answer. "Uncle Wally, pack your things," Justin said. No hello, no asking how my health was. Just an order barked over the sound of traffic. I took a sip of coffee. "Good morning to you too, Justin. Listen, I do not have time for pleasantries," he rushed on. "Brittany and I have been looking at your numbers. You are sitting on a wasted asset. That cottage is prime real estate. We are coming up on Friday to start the conversion." "Conversion," I repeated, my voice flat. "Airbnb, Uncle Wally. High-end. Luxury. We are going to monetize the view. We have already drafted the listing. Brittany has a vision. We are going to paint everything white, rip out those old carpets, and put in a cedar hot tub. It is going to be a cash machine." He was talking about my home as if it were a distressed asset in a portfolio. He was talking about the carpets Patricia had chosen because they were soft on our feet in the winter. "I am living here, Justin," I said. "This is not an investment property. This is my home." "That is the best part," he interrupted, his voice dripping with false generosity. "We figured it out. You can stay. The property has that detached storage unit behind the kitchen, right? The one where you keep the mower? We will clear that out. Put a cot in there. You can live in the back unit when we have guests. You will be like the on-site caretaker. It gives you a purpose." I stared at the lake. A bald eagle was circling a thermal draft near the tree line. It was hunting. I felt a strange calm settle over me. This boy was telling me, a man who had engineered the drainage systems for half this county, that I could sleep in my own tool shed. "Justin," I said slowly, "I do not want to run a hotel." "You do not have a choice," he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Mom signed over her share of the family trust to me last week. Technically, half that land is mine now. You can either work with me and get a small percentage, or I can force a sale and put you in a state-run home. Brittany says we are doing you a favor. You are too old to be out there alone anyway. We are coming Friday. Have the main bedroom cleared out." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. My hand was not shaking. I expected it to shake, but it was steady as a rock. He was right about one thing. My sister had partial claim to the land the cottage sat on, a mistake from our parents' will that we had never rectified because we trusted each other. Now she had passed that weapon to her son. He thought he had leverage. He thought he had the high ground. He did not know that while the house sat on family land, the infrastructure did not. I finished my coffee. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. Then I walked up the gravel path to my house, went into my study, and dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. "Prescott," I said when the voice answered. "It is Wallace King. Don't hang up. I need you to pull the 1985 county zoning maps and the easement records for Lot 42. And Prescott, tell me everything you can find on Justin King's financials. I think my nephew is about to make a very expensive mistake." By Friday, the peace of Lake Crescent was shattered. I heard them before I saw them. A massive black SUV with tinted windows tore down my gravel driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled on my hydrangeas. It was the kind of car that screamed money, but was almost certainly leased. Justin stepped out first. He was wearing a designer tracksuit and sunglasses that cost more than my first car. He looked at the towering Douglas fir trees surrounding my house, not with awe, but with the calculating squint of a lumberjack assessing board feet. Then came Brittany. She stepped out of the passenger side, looked at the mud on her white sneakers, and grimaced. She was holding a tablet and a Starbucks cup. She did not look at the lake. She looked at my house. "Oh God, Justin," she said, her voice carrying through the crisp air. "It is smaller than the pictures. And look at that siding. It is rotting. We are going to have to reclad the whole thing in modern farmhouse gray." They walked right past me. I was standing on the porch, wearing my fishing vest and my favorite flannel shirt. To them, I was part of the scenery, like a garden gnome or a stump. "Hey, Uncle Wally," Justin said without stopping. He pushed past me and opened the front door. The lock clicked. He had a key. My sister must have given him hers. I followed them inside. My house smelled of wood smoke, old books, and the lavender oil Patricia used to put on the linens. It was the smell of 40 years of life. Brittany wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, it smells like old people," she said, waving her hand in front of her face. "We need to gut this. Open concept. Knock down that wall. We need airflow." She walked into the living room. In the corner, by the stone fireplace, sat Patricia's leather reading chair. It was worn in the arms, and the seat was cracked, but it was shaped exactly to her body. I still sat in it sometimes when I missed her, which was every day. "This has to go," Brittany said. She nudged the chair with her foot. "It is hideous. Justin, call the junk haulers. Tell them to bring a big truck. Everything in here is garbage." She kicked the chair again, harder this time. The leather squeaked. My chest tightened. It felt like a physical blow. I took a step forward, my hands balling into fists at my sides. I wanted to grab her by her expensive jacket and throw her out the door. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't fit to wipe the dust off Patricia's chair. But then I remembered Prescott's voice on the phone yesterday. "Wallace, listen to me. If you stop them now, it's a civil dispute. They have a claim to the title. But if you let them spend money, if you let them make structural changes without permits, and if you let them hang themselves with their own debt, we can trap them. You have to let them dig the hole." I stopped. I forced my hands to unclench. I looked at Justin, who was already tapping on the walls, looking for studs. "You cannot throw that chair away," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "That was my wife's." Justin turned around. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a very important thought. "Uncle Wally, look at the big picture," he said, sighing. "We are creating an experience here. Rustic luxury. Nobody wants to sit in a dead woman's chair. It's unhygienic. We are replacing it with a mid-century modern sectional. Cream velvet. It's already ordered." He turned back to the wall. Brittany was already peeling a strip of wallpaper off the hallway, the floral wallpaper Patricia and I had hung together in 1990. I walked over to the chair. I picked up the small framed photo of Patricia that sat on the side table next to it. I slipped the photo into my vest pocket, right next to my heart. "Fine," I said. Brittany stopped peeling the paper. She looked at me, surprised by my surrender. "Fine?" she asked. "Fine," I repeated. "You want to run this show? Run it. I will move my things to the shed." "Good," Justin said, clapping his hands together. "I knew you would see reason. The contractors are coming tomorrow. We are putting in a skylight and expanding the deck. Oh, and Wally? Try to keep out of the way when the crew gets here. We are on a tight schedule. We go live in 3 weeks." I nodded. I turned and walked out the back door toward the boathouse shed. It was a cold, damp structure with a concrete floor and a single window that faced the woods. It had no insulation. As I walked, I heard the sound of glass breaking inside my house. They had probably dropped one of Patricia's vases. I did not look back. I walked into the shed and sat on a bucket. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Captain Miller, the county sheriff, and my fishing buddy for 20 years. They are here. They are starting demolition tomorrow. No permits. Then I sent a text to Prescott. Let them spend the money. I sat in the cold shed and listened to them laughing inside my warm house. They were celebrating their victory. They thought they had defeated a weak old man. They thought I was senile. They thought I was helpless. They did not know that I had the original blueprints for the septic system in my head. They did not know that the ground they were standing on was a protected wetland buffer zone. Justin wanted to build a kingdom. He didn't realize he was building it on quicksand, and I was the one who controlled the water level. The next morning, the invasion began in earnest. The contractor Justin hired wasn't local. I could tell by the license plates on his truck. He was from the city, probably one of Justin's buddies who cut corners. A local contractor would have known better. A local contractor would have checked the county records. They started at 8 a.m. with a sledgehammer. I sat on a folding chair outside the shed, drinking my coffee from a thermos, watching them tear apart my life. They dragged Patricia's chair out to a dumpster they had dropped in the middle of my driveway. Then came the dining table. Then the bookshelves. Justin came out to the porch, holding a roll of architectural drawings. He looked at me sitting by the shed and waved dismissively. "Hey, Wally," he shouted. "If you're going to sit there, can you at least look busy? Maybe rake some leaves? We need the curb appeal to pop." I stood up slowly. My knees popped. I walked over to the edge of the driveway where a massive oak tree stood. It was 200 years old. Its roots went deep under the house, stabilizing the soil near the lake edge. Brittany walked out, pointing at the tree. "Justin, that tree is blocking the light," she whined. "The kitchen is too dark, and it drops leaves everywhere. We need to cut it down." Justin looked at the tree. "Yeah, you're right. It's gotta go." "Hey, contractor, how much to drop this tree today?" I stepped forward. "You cannot cut that tree," I said. Justin rolled his eyes. "Here we go." "Why not, Wally? Is it sentimental too? Did you and Aunt Patricia carve your initials in it?" "No," I said. "It is a keystone oak. It holds the bank together. And we are within 50 feet of the water line." Justin laughed. He walked over and patted me on the shoulder. It was a patronizing pat, the kind you give a dog. Technology has come a long way since you were working, Uncle Wally. We have retaining walls now. We don't need trees. Chop it down. I watched the contractor pull the starter cord on his chainsaw. The engine roared to life, a scream that tore through the quiet morning. I did not stop them. I pulled out my phone and hit record. I filmed Justin pointing at the tree. I filmed the contractor cutting into the bark. I filmed the sawdust flying. In Washington State, cutting down a protected tree in a critical environmental zone without a permit carries a fine of up to $10,000 per tree, plus mandatory remediation costs. That was $10,000 Justin just spent, and he didn't even know it yet. As the tree crashed to the ground, shaking the earth, Brittany clapped. "Much better," she squealed. "Now we can put the jacuzzi right there." The jacuzzi. I looked at the spot where the tree had been. It was directly over the leach field for the septic tank. A septic tank that was installed in 1980, designed for a 2-bedroom cottage occupied by 2 people. They wanted to put a 3,000-pound tub of hot water on top of a 40-year-old drain field. "You are going to put a hot tub there?" I asked, keeping my face neutral. "Yes, Wally," Justin sneered. "A 6-person infinity spa. It's essential for the luxury market." "Why? Do you have a problem with hot tubs too?" "No problem," I said. "It sounds heavy." "It is heavy," he said. "That is why we are pouring a concrete pad first." Concrete. Over the leach field. This was going to be spectacular. I walked back to my shed. I sat down and opened my laptop. I had access to the public records database. I saw that Justin had applied for 0 permits. Not for the demolition. Not for the tree removal. Not for the electrical work they were starting inside. He was doing everything under the table to save money. My phone rang. It was Prescott. "Wally, I got the financials on Justin," Prescott said. "It is worse than we thought." "Tell me," I said. "He is underwater. He owes $150,000 in credit card debt and personal loans. He has maxed out everything to flip this house. He has already taken deposits for 20 bookings this summer. He has spent that money too. So he needs this place to open on time," I said. "He is desperate," Prescott confirmed. "If he misses his opening date, the chargebacks will bankrupt him." "And Wally?" "He listed the house as collateral for a hard money loan from a very aggressive lender." "He gambled my house," I said. "He gambled his share of the house," Prescott corrected. "But since the title is muddy, he thinks he gambled the whole thing." "Excellent," I said. I hung up. I looked at the house. They were drilling holes in the siding now. Justin was not just a greedy nephew. He was a desperate man, standing on the edge of a cliff. And he had just handed me the shovel to push him over. That night, I slept on the cot in the shed. It was freezing. I could see my breath in the air. My back ached. I could hear the party they were throwing in the main house. They had invited friends over to show off the progress. I heard glass breaking again. I heard loud bass music thumping through the walls. I closed my eyes. I thought about the zoning laws. I thought about the Environmental Protection Acts. I thought about the easement rights that my father had secured in 1950, rights that were deeded to me specifically, not to the property. "Enjoy the party, Justin," I whispered to the cold dark. "It is going to be a very short summer." The next morning, the sun rose over Lake Crescent with a deceptive innocence. The water was glass, reflecting the towering firs. but the air around my property smelled of stale beer and arrogance. I was sitting on the edge of my cot in the shed, rubbing the stiffness out of my knee when the door banged open. There was no knock. There never was with Justin. He stood silhouetted against the morning light, holding a venti coffee for himself and nothing for me. He looked ragged, the kind of tired that comes from drinking cheap champagne and believing your own hype. "Morning, Uncle Wally," he said, his voice raspy. "Rise and shine. We have paperwork to do. Come up to the deck. Brittany wants this sorted before the brunch crowd gets here." I put on my boots slowly. I made sure to fumble with the laces, taking twice as long as necessary. I saw Justin check his watch, tapping his foot against the concrete floor. He was impatient. Good. Impatience makes people careless. I grabbed my reading glasses, the old ones with the scratched lenses that I kept specifically for moments when I needed to look particularly helpless, and followed him up the path. The deck was a disaster zone. There were empty White Claw cans crushed on the railing, and a half-eaten charcuterie board sitting in the sun. Brittany was sitting at the patio table, tapping furiously on her laptop. She didn't look up when I approached. She just shoved a stack of documents toward the empty seat opposite her. "Sit," she commanded. I sat. The chair was one of the folding metal ones the contractors had left. My beautiful teak patio set was likely in a landfill somewhere by now. Justin dropped a heavy pen on top of the papers. It made a dull thud. "Okay, Wally, here is the deal," he said, pacing behind me like a shark in a fish tank. "Since we are sinking so much capital into the renovation, we need to formalize the management structure. My accountant says it is a liability to have your name on the operating expenses. You are retired. You do not want the IRS auditing you because of our business volume." He paused, waiting for me to nod. I blinked at him, keeping my mouth slightly open. The confused old man's stare. It was a weapon I had refined over years of sitting in city council meetings, listening to developers lie about drainage reports. "So," Justin continued, pressing on, "we drafted up some standard forms. Basically, this just lets me handle the taxes, the permits, and the bills. It keeps your hands clean. You just sign and you go back to fishing. We handle the headaches." I looked down at the stack. It was thick, at least 30 pages. He called this standard. I licked my thumb and lifted the cover page. The first document was titled Property Management Agreement. Harmless enough on the surface. But underneath that was a document that made my blood run cold. Durable Power of Attorney. And beneath that, buried in the middle of the stack like a landmine, was a quitclaim deed. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost burned through my act. He wasn't just trying to manage the business. He was trying to take everything. A durable power of attorney would give him the legal right to make financial decisions for me, to sell my assets, to access my bank accounts, all under the guise of acting in my best interest. And the quitclaim deed? That was the kill shot. That document would transfer my ownership interest in the property directly to him for the sum of $1. He was trying to trick me into signing over my life's work while I sat there smelling his stale breath. I reached for the pen, but I let my hand tremble. I have a slight essential tremor in my right hand anyway, but I dialed it up to an earthquake. I hovered the pen over the paper, then let it slip from my fingers. It clattered onto the deck and rolled under the table. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Brittany snapped. She stopped typing and glared at me. "I am sorry," I mumbled, leaning down. "My grip isn't what it used to be." I ducked under the table. While I was down there, hidden by the tablecloth, I pulled my phone from my vest pocket. I had already set the camera to silent mode. I held the phone up, angling it toward the edge of the table where the documents hung over slightly. I couldn't get a picture of everything, but I didn't need to. I needed the header and the first paragraph of the power of attorney. I snapped 3 photos in rapid succession. Then I grabbed the pen and groaned as I pulled myself back up. "Got it," I wheezed, placing the pen back on the table. Justin was looking at the lake, distracted. He didn't see a thing. I adjusted my glasses, squinting at the text. I needed to stall. I needed to see just how sloppy they had been. I brought the paper closer to my face, scanning the fine print of the quitclaim deed. And there it was. A mistake so glaring, so amateurish, that I almost laughed out loud. The legal description of the property. In land use law, the legal description is everything. It is the DNA of the parcel. It defines the boundaries, the township, the range, and the section. If you get one number wrong, the document is worthless. It doesn't attach to the land. Justin had used an online template, I could tell by the font, and he had copied the legal description from the tax assessor's website. But he had copied the wrong year. In 2010, the county had replatted this section of the lakefront due to a shoreline erosion adjustment. The parcel number had changed by 1 digit. The document Justin wanted me to sign was trying to transfer ownership of a parcel of land that no longer legally existed in the county registry. Furthermore, the power of attorney form was notarized. Or rather, it had a spot for a notary, but Justin had already filled in the notary's name. Brandon Smith. I knew Brandon. He was a buddy of Justin's from high school. He wasn't here. Notarizing a signature without the signer present is a felony in Washington state. They were handing me a loaded gun and asking me to shoot them with it. "Why is this print so small?" I complained, pushing the papers away slightly. "I need my other glasses, the reading ones." "Just sign it, Wally," Justin snapped, losing his patience. "It is just boilerplate. Stop stalling." I looked at him. I looked at the desperation in his eyes. He needed this house as collateral. Prescott had told me about the hard money loan. The lender would require clear title or a primary position lien. Justin couldn't give them that unless I signed these papers. He was cornered. I leaned forward, my hand shaking just enough to be convincing. "I do not understand this part," I said, pointing to a paragraph in the management agreement. "It says, exclusive rights to all vegetative management." "That means we can cut the grass, Wally," Brittany said, rolling her eyes. "Just sign the damn paper so we can get to work." Vegetative management. In legal terms, that phrase usually applied to forestry contracts, not residential gardening. They had literally copy-pasted this from a logging contract. They were idiots. Dangerous, greedy idiots. I picked up the pen again. I knew what I had to do. If I refused to sign, they would forge my signature. I knew that now. They were desperate enough. But if I signed this specific document, this flawed, erroneous, legally void piece of trash, they would think they had won. They would stop looking for other ways to hurt me. They would proceed with their plan, thinking they were safe, building their castle on a foundation that didn't exist. And when they tried to file this deed at the county clerk's office, it would be rejected. But by then, the hard money lender would already be asking for his money. "I am just an old man," I muttered, playing the part. "I do not understand all this legalese. But if you say it is for the best—" "It is," Justin said, his voice softening, sensing victory. "It is for the family, Uncle Wally. We are protecting the legacy." Protecting the legacy. He was stealing the ground from under my feet. I pressed the pen to the paper. I signed my name. But I didn't sign Wallace King. I signed W.H. King. My legal name on the deed, the name Patricia and I had recorded in 1980, was Wallace Henry King. In Washington state real estate transactions, a signature must match the grantor's name exactly as it appears on the title. A variance in the signature, combined with the error in the parcel number, would make this document radioactive to any title company. I signed every page with that slightly wrong signature. I watched Justin's shoulders relax. I watched Brittany smirk at her laptop screen. "There," I said, capping the pen. "Is that all?" "That is it," Justin said, snatching the papers away before the ink was even dry. He didn't check the signature. He didn't check the parcel number. He just saw the ink and saw dollar signs. "Thanks, Uncle Wally. You really helped us out. Now why don't you head back to the shed? We have a designer coming in an hour to look at the lighting, and we need the space." I stood up. My knee popped loudly. "Okay," I said. "I will get out of your hair." I walked down the steps, moving slowly, looking at the ground. But inside, my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour. As soon as I was out of sight, round the corner of the house, I pulled out my phone. I sent the photos of the documents to Prescott. He tried to get me to sign a quitclaim and a POA. I signed them. But check the parcel number on the second photo, and look at the signature. I waited. 3 dots appeared. Then a text came back. "Parcel number is invalid. Signature is non-conforming. The documents are trash." But Justin doesn't know that. He is going to try to leverage these immediately. "Wally, you just handed him a rope, and he thinks it is a lifeline." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "Let him hang," I typed back. I walked back to the shed. The air was getting warmer, but I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. They had tried to strip me of everything. They had tried to erase my existence with a few sheets of paper. I sat down on my cot and opened my laptop. I pulled up the county's GIS mapping system. I zoomed in on my property. I looked at the red lines defining the boundaries. Then I zoomed in on the driveway, the long, winding gravel road that connected the cottage to the main highway. Justin thought the driveway was part of the property. Everyone did. It looked like it was. But 70 years ago, my father had bought the land for the driveway, separately from a neighbor who was in debt. He had never merged the titles. The cottage sat on Lot 42. The driveway sat on a strip of land designated as Lot 42B. And Lot 42B was not in the family trust. My sister had no claim to it. It was solely 100% in my name. Justin had just acquired a house that he couldn't legally access. I closed the laptop. I could hear them celebrating up on the deck. I heard the pop of a cork. They were toasting to their cleverness. They were toasting to the end of Wallace King. I lay back on the cot and stared at the unfinished rafters of the shed. Let them celebrate. Let them spend the money. Let them invite the world to my doorstep. Because when the party was over, they were going to find out that the only way off this property was through me. And the toll was going to be everything they had. 2 days later, I returned from the hardware store with a bag of galvanized screws and a sandwich I had bought at the gas station. The drive back along the lake road usually calmed me. The towering evergreens, the glimpses of steel-gray water, the smell of rain that never quite leaves the air in Washington. It was the landscape of my life. But as I pulled my truck up the gravel drive, the knot in my stomach tightened. The first thing I saw was the door. My solid oak front door. The one Patricia and I had sanded down and restained 3 times over the years, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, modern slab of frosted glass and black steel. It looked like the entrance to a dental clinic, not a lake cottage. And right in the center of it glowed a digital keypad, a smart lock. The numbers burned a cool, aggressive blue in the twilight. I parked my truck and walked up the steps. I reached for my keychain out of habit, then stopped. There was no keyhole, just a smooth black surface, waiting for a code I did not have. I stood there for a moment, staring at the blue light. I felt like a stranger. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I knocked. It was a solid, heavy knock, the kind that demands an answer. Nothing happened for a long time. Then I saw a shadow move behind the frosted glass. The lock chirped a cheerful electronic melody, and the door swung open. Brittany stood there. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was the one I had bought Patricia for our 30th anniversary. It was slightly too big for Brittany, draping off her shoulders, but seeing her in it made bile rise in my throat. She held a glass of my best Cabernet in one hand and her phone in the other. "Oh, hi, Wally," she said, her voice bored. "You are back." "I need the code, Brittany," I said. "I need to get into my house." She took a sip of wine, leaving a lipstick stain on the rim. "Yeah, about that," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "We actually need you to transition to the boathouse tonight. Fully. Justin and I are doing a photo shoot for the listing tomorrow morning, and we need the master bedroom staged. We moved your stuff down there already." I stared at her. They had gone into my room. They had touched my things. They had taken my clothes, my books, the small box of letters Patricia wrote me during the war, and they had moved them. "You moved my things," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Just the basics," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "The rest is packed in boxes in the garage. We need the closet space. This robe, by the way, is vintage chic. I love it." She smoothed the silk over her arm. "That was my wife's," I said. "Well, it fits the aesthetic," she said. "Look, Wally, we really need privacy tonight. We have a lot of planning to do. The boathouse is unlocked. We put a space heater in there. It should be fine." She reached out and tapped the screen on the lock. "Good night, Wally." The door slid shut with a heavy mechanical thud. The lock chirped again, and the blue light pulsed once, then went steady. Locked. I stood on the porch of the house I had built with my own hands. I looked at the digital lock that barred me from my own kitchen, my own heat, my own memories. I could have kicked the door in. I knew the framing. I knew exactly where to strike to shatter the jam. I had the strength, and I certainly had the rage. But I didn't. I turned around and walked down the steps. "Let them feel safe," Prescott had said. "Let them get comfortable." I walked past my truck and down the sloping path toward the water. The boathouse sat at the edge of the lake, a structure I had built in 1985 to store a small fishing boat and winter gear. It was built of rough cedar planks. It had a concrete floor that was always damp from the lake seepage. There was no insulation. There was no plumbing. There was a single bare bulb hanging from a rafter. I pushed the door open. It creaked on rusty hinges. The smell hit me instantly. Gasoline, old oil, mildew, and the sharp, cold scent of the lake. They had dumped my things in a pile in the center of the room, my duffel bag, my fishing rods, a stack of books. They had thrown my pillow on top of a coil of rope. I looked for the space heater Brittany had mentioned. It was there. A tiny plastic fan heater, the kind you buy for $15 at a discount store. It was plugged into an extension cord that ran out the window and up toward the main house. I turned it on. It whirred to life, rattling loudly, blowing a stream of lukewarm air that dissipated instantly in the drafty room. It was 45 degrees outside and dropping. The dampness from the concrete floor seeped through the soles of my boots. I set up the cot they had left leaning against the wall. It was an old army surplus cot, canvas stretched over a metal frame. I laid my sleeping bag on it. I arranged my few belongings on a workbench that smelled of two-stroke engine oil. This was my home now. I sat on the cot and wrapped a wool blanket around my shoulders. Through the single dirty window, I could see the main house up on the hill. It was blazing with light. Every window was illuminated. They had the heat cranked up, I could tell. I could see their silhouettes moving back and forth in the living room. Then I saw the light go on in the master bedroom, my bedroom. I watched as Brittany walked past the window, still wearing Patricia's robe. Then Justin appeared. He was laughing. He had a bottle of champagne in his hand. He toasted the window, looking out over the lake, looking right over the boathouse, as if I didn't exist. They were celebrating. They were drinking my wine, sleeping in my bed, and dreaming of the money they were going to make. I lay back on the cot and stared at the dark, cobwebbed ceiling. The sound of the bass from their music thrummed through the ground, vibrating against the concrete floor. It was a low, constant thudding that mocked me. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I went into my mind. I went to the filing cabinet in my brain, where I kept 40 years of county maps. I visualized the plat map for Section 12, Township 30, North Range 8, West. I saw the lines drawn in black ink on linen paper. I saw the blue line of the lake. I saw the jagged line of the creek. And I saw the red line of the property boundary. Justin thought he owned the view. He thought he owned the experience. But I traced the lines in my mind. I focused on the septic system diagrams I had approved in 1980. 2 tanks, concrete, 1,000 gallons each. A gravity-fed leach field that ran south toward the tree line. The tree line where they had just poured a concrete pad for a hot tub. I smiled in the darkness. The concrete would be curing by now. It was heavy. Thousands of pounds of wet cement pressing down on the soil, pressing down on the distribution pipes, compacting the earth. If they had filed for a permit, the county engineer would have told them. He would have said, "You cannot build there. That is your absorption field. If you cover it, the effluent has nowhere to go." But they didn't ask. They just poured. And tomorrow, or the next day, or next week, when they started flushing toilets and running showers and filling that massive hot tub, the water would go into the tank. And then it would try to go into the field. But the field would be crushed. The field would be sealed under a slab of luxury concrete. And physics is a cruel mistress. When water cannot go down, it comes up. I listened to the music pounding from the house. I pulled the blanket tighter. Enjoy the master bedroom, Justin. Enjoy the silk sheets. Because very soon, the shit is literally going to hit the fan. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the sandwich I had bought. It was cold and the bread was stale. I ate it slowly, chewing with deliberate rhythm. I was cold. I was uncomfortable. I was exiled to a shed like a disobedient dog. But I was the one holding the map. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Prescott. Motion to quiet title is drafted. We file the moment he tries to record that quitclaim deed. Also the hard money lender? They have a clause. If the property value drops, or if there are code violations, they can call the loan immediately. Full repayment in 30 days. I typed back with frozen fingers. Code violations are coming. Stand by. I put the phone away. I watched the lights in the big house finally go out, one by one, until only the porch light remained. The blue glow of the smart lock was a tiny pinprick in the darkness. They were asleep. Safe and warm, in a house they didn't own, on land they didn't understand. I closed my eyes and listened to the lake lapping against the pilings of the boathouse. The water was rising. Winter was coming. And I was the only one who knew how to swim. The fog on Lake Crescent was thick enough to chew on when I woke up. My back was a knot of pain from the canvas cot, and my breath hung in the air like smoke. It was 6 a.m. I could hear the silence of the main house up the hill. They were sleeping off their champagne dreams while I boiled water on a hot plate that took 20 minutes to heat up. I sat there shivering, holding a tin mug, waiting. I knew the call was coming. I had felt the vibration of the phone in my pocket before it even rang. It was Prescott. I answered on the first ring. "Tell me," I said. My voice was rough from the cold, damp air of the boathouse. "You are going to want to sit down," Wally Prescott said. His voice was tight, professional, but I could hear the adrenaline in it. He had found something. "I am sitting on a bucket, Prescott. Just give it to me." "Okay, here is the autopsy report on your nephew's finances. It is not just bad, it is terminal." I took a sip of the scalding water. I listened. "Justin isn't just in debt," Prescott began. "He is insolvent." I pulled his credit report and cross-referenced it with public court filings. He has 3 maxed-out credit cards with a combined balance of $45,000. He has a personal line of credit that is overdrawn. But that is just the surface. "Go deeper," I said. "He has a gambling problem, Wally. Online sports betting. He lost $60,000 last year alone. He took out a second mortgage on his condo in Seattle to cover it, but he missed the payments. The bank initiated foreclosure proceedings 2 weeks ago. That is why they are here. They didn't come to the lake to build an empire. They came here because they are about to be homeless." I looked out the dirty window at the main house. It looked peaceful. It looked expensive. It was a lie wrapped in cedar siding. "What about the renovation money?" I asked. "The contractors, the materials?" "Hard money loan," Prescott said. "High interest, short term. The kind of loan you get from guys who do not ask for credit scores, but do ask for your kneecaps as collateral." He borrowed $50,000 against the future equity of the cottage. He forged a document claiming he had sole title. That is fraud, Wally. Federal wire fraud if the money crossed state lines. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. Justin wasn't just a greedy kid. He was a criminal. And he was a stupid one. "And the bookings?" I asked. He said he had guests coming. He does. That is the Ponzi scheme part. He listed the cottage on 3 different luxury rental sites 6 months ago. He used old photos. Your photos. He has taken $20,000 in deposits, non-refundable, he claims. "Where is the money now?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Gone," Prescott said. "Spent. He bought that Range Rover he drove up in. He bought Brittany a diamond bracelet. He is spending the revenue before the service is provided. If he cancels those bookings, he has to refund the money. He does not have the money, Wally. If he doesn't open on time, if he doesn't get those reviews, if the cash flow stops for even a week, he goes to prison, or he goes to the hospital. He is terrified." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence of the shed. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a satisfying snap. The desperation, the rush, the sloppy paperwork. The way Brittany looked at the house, not with love, but with hunger. They were starving rats in designer clothes. I stood up. My knee popped, but I didn't feel the pain anymore. The cold didn't bother me. The anger that had been burning in my gut for days suddenly cooled into something solid, something hard and useful. I walked to the door of the shed and pushed it open. The morning light hit my face. I looked up at the house. Justin came out onto the deck. He was wearing a silk robe and holding a tablet. He looked down at me. He didn't wave. He just stared. He looked like a king surveying his domain. But I knew the truth now. He wasn't a king. He was a squatter. He was a desperate man holding a lit stick of dynamite, and he had just handed me the match. He yelled down to me, "Hey, Wally! The plumber is coming at noon to hook up the new showers. Make sure the gate is open. And stay out of the way. We have investors coming for a walkthrough at 3. Investors. That was code for the hard money lenders. They were coming to check on their collateral. I waved back at him. A slow, friendly wave. The wave of a senile old uncle who knows his place. "Sure thing, Justin," I called back. "I will open the gate." I walked toward the gate. It was a heavy iron gate that I had installed 10 years ago to keep the deer out. I pushed it open. As I walked back, I stopped by the main electrical panel on the side of the garage. It was an old box, 200 amps, sufficient for a cottage. Not sufficient for a commercial hotel with a hot tub, 2 new showers, and a commercial-grade espresso machine that I had seen them drag in yesterday. I looked at the breakers. They were old, sensitive. Justin wanted to impress his investors. He wanted to show them a fully functional luxury experience. He wanted the lights blazing, the music pumping, the hot tub bubbling. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small screwdriver. I didn't cut any wires. That would be sabotage. That would be illegal. I simply loosened the neutral wire on the main bus bar. Just a quarter turn. Not enough to break the connection. Just enough to create resistance. Just enough to make the connection unstable under a heavy load. When they turned on everything at once, the heat would build up. The breaker wouldn't trip immediately. It would hold for a while. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20. Just long enough for them to get comfortable. Just long enough for the investors to have a drink in their hands. And then, click. Darkness. I put the screwdriver away. I walked back to the shed whistling. I was done playing defense. I was done protecting my home. My home was already a crime scene. Now I was the cleanup crew. I sat back down on my cot and opened my laptop. I pulled up the county health department website. I found the section on reporting unsanitary conditions. I found the form for reporting illegal septic modifications. I filled it out. I attached the photos I had taken of the concrete pad over the leach field. I attached the video of the tree being cut down in the wetland buffer. I didn't hit send. Not yet. Prescott said Justin needed the house to open. If I shut him down now, he would just declare bankruptcy and walk away, leaving me with a destroyed house and a legal mess. No. I needed him to finish. I needed him to spend every last dime he had. I needed him to install the marble countertops. I needed him to tile the bathrooms. I needed him to think he had crossed the finish line. I needed the guests to arrive. I needed the reviews to be written. I needed the chargebacks to hit his account all at once. I saved the draft. Then I went to my tackle box. I pulled out a spool of heavy-duty fishing line, 80-pound test, braided, invisible in the water. I walked down to the dock. The contractor had left a pile of lumber near the water's edge, ready to build the new sunset deck Brittany wanted. I tied a length of fishing line to a loose board on the dock. I ran it underwater, tying it to the main intake pipe for the lake water irrigation system. The system they were using to water their new sod lawn. I tied the other end to a heavy rock. I balanced the rock on the edge of a piling. It was a simple mechanism. A vibration, a heavy footstep on the dock would knock the rock off. The line would pull the intake pipe up out of the water. The pump would suck air. It would burn out in 5 minutes. Petty? Maybe. But they had thrown away my wife's chair. I went back to the shed. I waited. At noon, the plumber arrived. He was a young guy, overworked and underpaid. I watched him from the window. He looked at the old pipes under the house. He shook his head. He tried to tell Justin something. Justin waved his hands. He pointed at his watch. He handed the guy a wad of cash. The plumber shrugged. He started cutting pipes. He was connecting high-pressure fixtures to 40-year-old galvanized steel. I could hear the water hammer from here. Thud, thud, thud. The pipes were screaming. They were warning him. I poured myself another cup of coffee. Let them scream, I thought. Let them sing the song of their people. At 3 p.m., the investors arrived. 3 men in suits looking out of place in the mud. They walked around the property, pointing and nodding. Justin was dancing around them, pouring drinks, laughing too loud. They stood on the new concrete pad. They admired the view where the tree used to be. I saw one of the men hand Justin an envelope. More money. More rope for the hangman. I watched until the sun went down. The investors left. Justin and Brittany collapsed on the deck, exhausted, but triumphant. They had the money. They had the timeline. They thought they were untouchable. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the overloaded refrigerator in the main house. I thought about the debt. $150,000. Justin wasn't building a business. He was digging a grave. And I was just waiting to hand him the shovel. Tomorrow they would start the interior finishing. Paint, carpet, furniture. I had a surprise for the furniture delivery too. But for now, I slept. For the first time since they arrived, I slept soundly. Because now, I knew the ending of the story. And it was going to be a tragedy for everyone but me. The next 3 days were a masterclass in desecration. I watched from the shadows of my shed as the delivery trucks rolled in, churning up the mud in the driveway I had carefully graded for 30 years. They brought in pallets of composite decking, boxes of recessed lighting, and enough white paint to blind a pilot. The noise was constant, drills whining, saws screaming, and over it all, the thump of electronic dance music that Justin insisted on playing to keep the vibe up. I sat on my bucket, sharpening my fillet knife. It was a rhythmic, soothing motion. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I wasn't planning to use it on anything but fish, but the sound seemed to unsettle Brittany whenever she walked past the shed. Good. On Thursday morning, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't just construction anymore. It was demolition. I heard the deep, throaty idle of a diesel engine. I walked out to see a heavy-duty excavator inching its way down the side of the house, its tracks tearing deep gashes into the soft earth. Justin was standing on the new deck, wearing a hard hat that looked like a toy on his head, pointing toward the lakefront. Specifically, toward the grove of western red cedars that lined the water's edge. Those trees were giants. They were there before my father bought the land. They were there before the state of Washington existed. Their roots were a complex web that held the entire bank together against the winter storms. Patricia used to sit under the largest one, reading her books, sheltered from the rain by its massive canopy. I walked up the hill, my knees protesting the incline. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice cutting through the engine noise. Justin turned, beaming. He looked manic, his eyes bright with sleeplessness and greed. "Hey, Wally, we are opening up the view. The landscape architect said these trees are blocking the money shot. We need an unobstructed sightline from the living room to the water. Plus, we're putting in a fire pit lounge down there." He gestured to the excavator operator who was revving the engine. "You cannot remove those cedars," I said, keeping my hands in my pockets so he wouldn't see them clench. "Oh, relax, Uncle Wally," Brittany chimed in, walking out with her tablet. "We are replacing them with ornamental grasses and some tasteful Japanese maples. It will look much cleaner. Those big trees are messy. They drop needles everywhere." Messy. She called a 300-year-old ecosystem messy. "Justin," I said, trying one last time, mostly for the sake of the recording I was about to make. "This is a critical areas buffer zone. You are within 20 feet of the shoreline. The roots of those trees prevent erosion. If you take them out, the bank will collapse into the lake during the first heavy rain." Justin laughed. He walked over and put his arm around my shoulder. I flinched. "Wally, you are living in the past. We have geotextiles now. We have engineering. The bank isn't going anywhere. Besides, I am the owner now, remember? You signed the papers. This is my call." He turned to the operator and made a slashing motion across his throat. "Take them down." I stepped back. I pulled out my phone. I didn't try to stop them physically. I knew I couldn't fight a machine, but I could fight the man who ordered it. I pressed record. The excavator arm swung out, the metal bucket teeth gleaming. It reached up and grabbed the trunk of the first cedar, the one Patricia loved. The engine roared, black smoke pouring from the exhaust stack. The machine pulled. The tree groaned. It was a sound like a living thing dying. The roots popped, loud as gunshots, tearing out of the earth. The soil heaved, and then, with a crash that shook the ground under my feet, the giant fell. It landed in the water with a massive splash, sending a wave washing over my dock. Brittany clapped. "Oh my God, the light! Look at how much brighter it is!" I filmed it all. I filmed the tree falling. I filmed the mud sliding into the crystal-clear water of Lake Crescent, turning it brown. I filmed Justin high-fiving the contractor. Then I zoomed in on the stump. I captured the jagged wood, the sap bleeding out. In Washington State, the Shoreline Management Act is not a suggestion. It is a strict liability statute. Removing significant vegetation within the buffer zone without a permit is a Class 1 civil infraction. But dumping sediment into a body of water? That triggers the Department of Ecology. That is a water quality violation. The fines start at $10,000 a day per violation and can go up to $50,000 for willful negligence. And this was willful. I watched them take down the second tree, then the third. By noon, the shoreline looked like a war zone. The shade was gone. The privacy was gone. The bank was a raw, bleeding wound of exposed dirt. Justin stood on the edge of the ruin, hands on his hips. "Now that is a view," he declared. "That is going to sell for $500 a night, easy." I stopped recording. I saved the video to the cloud. I sent a copy to Prescott, and another to a private email address I had set up just for this purpose. Then I walked down to the water's edge. The water was murky, filled with silt and debris. I knelt and dipped my hand in. It was cold. "I am sorry," I whispered to the lake. "I am sorry, Patricia." I stood up and looked at the house. They had stripped it of its character. They had stripped the land of its protection. They had violated the laws of nature and the laws of the state. Justin thought he was clearing a view. He didn't realize he was clearing a path for the inspectors. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Captain Miller. "I saw the heavy equipment moving down your road. Do you need me to intervene?" I typed back, "Not yet. Let them finish the landscaping. I want the environmental damage to be undeniable." I walked back to the shed. I felt old, older than I had ever felt. But I also felt dangerous. I sat down at my workbench and pulled out the 1985 zoning code book I kept for reference. I turned to the section on impervious surfaces. Justin had poured the concrete pad for the hot tub. Now he had stripped the vegetation. He was altering the hydrological footprint of the lot. He was increasing the runoff. When the rains came, and in Washington the rains always come, the water would no longer be absorbed by the cedar roots. It would run across the hard-packed dirt, over the concrete pad, and straight into the lake, carrying fertilizer, silt, and whatever chemicals they were using. But before it hit the lake, it would run over something else. It would run over the septic drain field. The drain field relied on evaporation and soil absorption to process the waste. If the soil was saturated with runoff because the trees were gone, the drain field would fail. It would become waterlogged. The effluent would have nowhere to go but up. By cutting down those trees, Justin hadn't just committed an environmental crime. He had sabotaged his own plumbing. I looked out the window at the excavator, now parking near the garage. They were done for the day. Justin and Brittany were already drinking wine on the deck, admiring their destruction. They didn't know it yet, but they had just pulled the pin on a biological grenade. I poured myself a glass of tap water. It tasted of iron. "Cheers, Justin," I said to the empty room. "You wanted a view. I hope you like the view of a hazmat team." By Friday morning, the invasion of my property had moved from the exterior to the gut of the house. I woke to the sound of porcelain shattering. It was the original toilet in the guest bathroom, a vintage Kohler model from the 50s that flushed with the force of a jet engine. They had smashed it to make room for something sleeker, something that probably had Bluetooth and a heated seat. I emerged from the shed, my joints stiff from the damp night air, to find a convoy of delivery trucks blocking the driveway. They were unloading the centerpiece of Brittany's vision, two massive freestanding soaking tubs made of crushed volcanic stone and resin. They weighed 400 pounds each. I watched two sweating delivery men struggle to carry the first one up the stairs. The wood of the porch groaned under the weight. They were taking it to the second floor, where Brittany had decided she needed an ensuite sanctuary. I walked up the path, sipping my lukewarm coffee. I knew the framing of that second floor. I had built it with 2x8 joists, 16 inches on center. It was sturdy enough for a bedroom. It was not engineered to hold a 400-pound tub, plus 60 gallons of water, plus a human being. That was nearly 1,000 pounds of dead load focused on a 4-square-foot area. But I said nothing about the joists. Structural failure would be a problem for later. Right now, I was focused on where that water was going to go after Brittany finished her lavender-infused soak. I found Justin in the kitchen arguing with the plumber. The kitchen floor was ripped up, exposing the subfloor. "I need 2 more waste lines," Justin was shouting, pointing at a hole in the floor. "One for the new master bath and one for the powder room under the stairs. Brittany says 12 guests means we need at least 3 full baths and a half bath. The plumber, a guy named Mike, who looked like he had seen too many bad renovations, shook his head. "Look, buddy," Mike said, wiping grease on his pants. "You have a 3-inch main stack. It is cast iron. It is old. You start tying in 3 new high-flow showers and 2 tubs, you are going to exceed the venting capacity. And that is before we even talk about where it is going. Your tank is out back, right?" "Yeah, it's out back," Justin snapped. "It's a tank. It holds shit. What is the problem?" I stepped into the doorway. I cleared my throat, making a show of adjusting my glasses. "Justin," I said, my voice trembling just a little. "That tank was put in back in 1980. It is 1,000 gallons. It was sized for 2 people. Me and your Aunt Patricia." Justin spun around. He looked at me with that mix of pity and irritation that was becoming his trademark. "Wally, we have been over this. It is a concrete box. Concrete doesn't shrink. It has plenty of room." "It is not about the room, son," I said, leaning against the doorframe for support. "It is about the biology. It is a gravity system. It needs retention time. The solids have to settle. The bacteria need 24 hours to break down the waste before the liquid moves to the drain field. If you have 12 people taking showers and flushing toilets all at once, you are going to flood the tank. The solids won't settle. They will flow right out into the pipes and clog the field." I paused, letting my voice drop to a whisper. "And since you paved over the field yesterday..." Justin cut me off with a laugh. He turned to Mike the plumber. "See, this is what I deal with. He thinks we're still living in the dark ages. Mike, tell him about the macerators." Mike sighed. He looked at me, then at Justin. "Yeah, we can install macerating pumps on the new lines. They grind everything into a slurry before it hits the tank. It helps with the flow." "There you go, Wally," Justin said, spreading his hands. "Technology. We are grinding it up. It is liquid. Liquid flows. Problem solved." I looked at the floor. I let my shoulders slump. "I do not know, Justin," I mumbled. "It sounds risky. If that field fails, you are going to have sewage bubbling up in the yard." Justin walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. He squeezed it a little too hard. "Uncle Wally, I know change is scary for you. You are used to your quiet little life. But this is business. We are maximizing capacity. More heads in beds means more money. Trust me, I have done the math. The system can handle it. Now why don't you go check on your fishing poles? We have real work to do." I nodded slowly, as if defeated. "Okay," I said. "I just don't want you to get in trouble." I turned and walked away. But inside I was screaming with laughter. Macerators. He thought grinding the waste was the solution. He didn't understand that by turning the solids into a slurry and pumping it under high pressure into an undersized tank, he was essentially creating a sewage smoothie that would never settle. The bacteria wouldn't have a chance. That slurry would shoot straight through the tank and into the perforated pipes of the drain field. And because the drain field was compacted under his new concrete patio, the slurry would have nowhere to leach. It would sit in the pipes. It would harden. It would turn his plumbing system into a sealed pressure cooker of human waste. But that wasn't the masterstroke. The masterstroke happened an hour later. I was watching from the window of the shed. Mike the plumber had come out of the house looking frustrated. He was digging a trench along the side of the house, trying to find a gradient for the new waste line from the downstairs powder room. Because Justin had insisted on putting a bathroom under the stairs, which was below the grade of the main septic line, Mike needed to find a way to get the waste out. Normally, you would install a sewage ejector pump to lift the waste up to the main line. But pumps cost money, and Justin was broke. I saw Justin come out. He was waving his arms, pointing at the ground. "I am not paying for a pump," I heard him yell. "Just find a pipe. There are pipes everywhere down here." Mike pointed to a white PVC pipe that was sticking out of the ground near the corner of the foundation. It was a 4-inch pipe. "What about that one?" Justin asked. "That looks like a drain line. Just tie into that." Mike scratched his head. "I don't know, man. I haven't traced it. It could be a footer drain." "It is a pipe," Justin screamed. "It goes down. Just glue it and bury it. We are pouring the walkway tomorrow." I held my breath. I knew exactly what that pipe was. When I built the house in 1980, the groundwater table was high. To keep the basement dry, I had installed a perimeter curtain drain. It was a separate system designed to catch rainwater and groundwater and channel it away from the foundation. It did not go to the septic tank. It went directly, unfiltered, into a gravel pit 50 yards away. A gravel pit that overflowed directly into the wetland buffer of Lake Crescent. If they tied a toilet into that line, they would be discharging raw sewage directly into the ecosystem. I watched Mike hesitate. He was a licensed plumber. He knew this was wrong. He knew he should dye test the line. But then I saw Justin reach into his pocket. He pulled out a thick envelope. Cash. The remaining dregs of his hard money loan. He shoved the envelope into Mike's chest. "Just get it done," Justin said. "No inspections, no permits, just make the water go away." Mike looked at the envelope. He looked at the house. He looked at his truck, which probably needed repairs. He took the money. I watched him cut the PVC pipe. I watched him glue the fitting. I watched him connect the toilet waste line directly to the rainwater storm drain. It was a federal offense, a violation of the Clean Water Act, a crime that carried prison time and fines that would make his credit card debt look like pocket change. I pulled out my phone. I zoomed in. I recorded the entire connection. I recorded Mike gluing the pipe. I recorded them shoveling dirt over it, burying the evidence. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was the weight of knowing that I was letting my home be defiled to save it. I was letting them turn my sanctuary into a toxic hazard. But I had to let the crime be completed. An attempted crime is a slap on the wrist. A completed environmental disaster is a felony. By sunset, the trench was filled. The new bathrooms were plumbed. Brittany was already talking about the spa experience she was going to market. I sat on my bucket peeling an orange. Justin walked by on his way to the car. He looked tired but triumphant. "All done, Wally," he said, not even stopping. 3 bathrooms fully operational. We test them tomorrow. I nodded. "Did you put in the ejector pump?" I asked innocently. "For the downstairs toilet?" Justin stopped. He turned and winked at me. "Trade secret, Uncle Wally. We found a gravity solution. Saved $2,000. That is how you run a business. You improvise. Improvise." He called poisoning the groundwater improvising. "That is smart, Justin," I said. "Very smart." He drove off, leaving me in the gathering dark. I finished my orange. I looked at the spot where they had buried the pipe. The dirt was fresh and dark. Tomorrow they would turn the water on. They would flush the toilets to test them. The water would flow. It would seem perfect. But the horror wouldn't happen tomorrow. It wouldn't happen when they flushed clean water. It would happen when 10 people arrived. When 10 people ate rich food and drank alcohol and used those toilets for 3 days straight. The solids would build up in the storm drain. The drain wasn't designed for solid waste. It had no slope for it. It had no water pressure behind it. The clog wouldn't form in the pipe. It would form at the outlet in the gravel pit. It would back up slowly, silent, invisible. And when it finally backed up enough, it wouldn't overflow outside. Because the storm drain was connected to the foundation footing. The sewage would back up under the house. It would saturate the soil beneath the floorboards. It would rise up through the heating vents. And the main septic tank? The one with the macerated slurry? That would fail simultaneously. The pressure from the blocked leach field would force the waste back toward the house. It would be a pincer movement. Sewage from below, sewage from above. I stood up and stretched. My bones cracked. I felt like an old general surveying a battlefield the night before the attack. I went into the shed and turned on the heater. It was time to make one last preparation. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Prescott. The trap is set. They crossed the lines. Literally. Draft the lawsuit for environmental negligence. And tell Miller to have his deputies ready for a hazmat call on Saturday. I sent the email. Then I lay down on the cot. I imagined the pipes under the earth like veins in a body waiting to burst. Justin wanted a legacy. I was going to give him one that would stick to him for the rest of his life. Saturday evening arrived with the scent of desperation and cheap cologne. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the deck where Justin had arranged rented furniture to hide the unfinished railing. I was in the shed, oiling my boots, when Brittany appeared in the doorway. She was holding a garment bag like it was a dead animal. "Put this on," she said, tossing it onto my cot. "And shower. Use the hose if you have to. We have VIPs coming. You are going to be the rustic charm." I unzipped the bag. Inside was a suit that looked like it had been pulled off a corpse in a thrift store. It was brown polyester, 3 sizes too big, and smelled of mothballs. It was a costume. They wanted me to play the part of the eccentric, harmless old uncle, the local color that came with the real estate. I put it on. The pants bunched at my ankles. The jacket hung off my shoulders. I looked ridiculous. I looked like a man who had lost everything, which was exactly what they wanted the investors to see. A man who was no threat. I walked up to the house. The party was already in full swing. Justin had strung Edison bulbs across the deck, tapping into the overloaded circuit I had compromised earlier. The music was loud, a thumping bass that vibrated the loose screws in the decking. There were about 15 people. I recognized 3 of them. They were the hard money guys, men in shiny suits with eyes like calculators. The rest were hangers-on, friends of Brittany who looked like they were auditioning for a reality show. They were drinking my wine. They were eating shrimp cocktails on the porch I built. Justin spotted me. He rushed over, grabbing my arm with a grip that was painful. "Okay, Wally, listen up," he hissed, his breath smelling of nervousness and vodka. "You are the butler tonight. Well, not a butler. You are the estate manager. Keep the glasses full. Clear the plates. And if anyone asks, you are thrilled about the renovation. You are grateful we let you stay. Got it?" I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead. "I got it," I said. "Good. Now get a tray. Table 4 is empty." I spent the next 2 hours being invisible. I moved through the crowd, pouring wine, picking up napkins, nodding when people spoke to me as if I were simple. I watched them stomp on the new decking. I watched them lean on the railing that wasn't bolted down correctly. But mostly, I listened. I listened to the plumbing. Every time someone went into the house to use the new powder room, I counted. 1 flush. 2 flushes. The water pressure was hammering. The pipes were vibrating in the walls. I knew that down in the crawl space, the glued connection to the storm drain was holding. For now. But the gravel pit outside was filling up. The ground was getting saturated. I circulated with a bottle of Merlot. I approached a small group standing near the outdoor heater. It was Justin, Brittany, and a man I didn't recognize. He was older, wearing a suit that actually fit, and he was looking at Justin with skepticism. "So the title is clear?" the man asked. His voice was low, dangerous. "Crystal clear," Justin lied, taking a large gulp of his drink. "My uncle signed the quitclaim last week. We're just waiting for the county to record it. He is out of the picture, legally speaking." "And physically?" the man asked. He gestured toward me with his chin. I was 10 feet away, pretending to struggle with a corkscrew. I kept my head down. "That is the next step," Brittany said, her voice dropping to a whisper. I strained to hear over the music. "We found a place in Idaho. It is a state facility, very affordable. We are going to transfer him next month, after the grand opening." Idaho. They were planning to ship me 2 states away to a state-run warehouse for the indigent. "But he seems cogent," the man said. "Can you just commit him?" Justin laughed. It was a cold sound. "We have that covered. He has been acting erratic, wandering off, forgetting things. We have a doctor who is willing to sign an affidavit of incapacity. Once we have that, we get guardianship. Then we liquidate his personal assets to pay you back the bridge loan. The old truck, his tools, the pension. It is all part of the package." I stopped turning the corkscrew. The metal bit into my palm. They weren't just going to take the house. They were going to strip me for parts. They were going to sell my truck. They were going to take my pension checks. And they were going to lock me in a room in Idaho until I died, alone and forgotten. This wasn't business. This was erasure. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the night air. It was the absolute absence of mercy. I looked at Justin. I remembered teaching him how to bait a hook on this very dock. I remembered buying him his first bicycle. That boy was dead. The thing standing in front of me was a parasite. I finished opening the bottle. The cork came out with a soft pop. I walked over to the group. My face was a mask of servile stupidity. "More wine, gentlemen?" I asked, my voice shaking just enough to sell the act. Justin jumped. He hadn't seen me approach. "Jesus, Wally, don't sneak up on people," he snapped. "Yeah, pour, and try not to spill it this time." I poured the wine. The liquid was dark red, almost black in the dim light. I filled the investor's glass to the brim. Then I filled Brittany's, then Justin's. I looked Justin in the eye. He looked through me, already turning back to the investor to make another promise he couldn't keep. "You have a beautiful home here," the investor said to Justin, taking the glass. "A real gold mine." "To the future," Justin said, raising his glass. "To new management." I raised the bottle slightly, just a fraction of an inch. "To the future," I whispered. They drank. They swallowed the wine that I had bought and stored in the cellar 3 years ago. They drank to their victory. I turned and walked away. I went into the kitchen. The sink was piled high with caterers' trays. The dishwasher was running. The garbage disposal was grinding. The load on the electrical panel was peaking. I could hear the breaker box on the side of the house humming. It was a low, angry buzz. The loose neutral wire was heating up. The resistance was building. I placed the empty bottle on the counter. I took off the polyester jacket and folded it neatly over a chair. I didn't need to be the servant anymore. The performance was over. I walked out the back door, past the humming electrical panel, past the spot where the sewage pipe was buried, and down the dark path to the shed. I sat on my cot and took out my phone. I opened the app for the smart thermostat in the main house. Justin had installed it on day 1, but he hadn't changed the master admin password. It was still the factory default. I looked at the temperature setting. It was set to 72 degrees. I tapped the screen. I turned the heat up to 85 degrees. Heat increases resistance in electrical circuits. It puts more load on the system. It makes people sweat. It makes them drink more water. It makes them flush more toilets. I watched the numbers climb on the screen. Then I opened the app for the exterior lighting. I turned on every floodlight, every pathway light, every decorative LED strip they had installed. I was maxing out the grid. I lay back on the cot. I could hear the party getting louder. They were drunk now. They were confident. They were standing on a trap door, and I had just greased the hinges. They wanted to send me to Idaho. I was going to send them to hell. Tomorrow was the grand opening. The influencers were coming. The cameras would be rolling. I closed my eyes and waited for the sunrise. It was going to be a beautiful day for a disaster. The morning of the grand opening did not dawn with the majesty of a sunrise. It arrived with the screech of tires and the thumping bass of a Mercedes Sprinter van that cost more than my entire retirement fund. It was 10 o'clock sharp. The fog had burned off, revealing a blue sky that felt complicit in the deception. I was sitting on the end of the dock, fishing pole in hand, not because I expected to catch anything, but because it gave me a front row seat to the circus. The van navigated the gravel driveway with difficulty. My potholes, which I usually filled every spring, had been left intentionally deep this year. I watched the suspension bottom out with a satisfying crunch. Justin ran out of the house like a valet parking attendant who had missed a shift. He was wearing a crisp white linen shirt and loafers without socks. He looked like he was auditioning for a yacht commercial. Brittany followed, holding a tray of mimosas that trembled in her hands. The side door of the van slid open, and the invasion began. There were 10 of them. They spilled out onto the driveway like a chemical spill, loud, bright, and toxic. They were the influencers from Seattle that Justin had bet his life on. They didn't look at the lake. They didn't breathe in the fresh cedar air. They looked at their phones. The leader of the pack was a young man with bleached hair and a camera rig strapped to his chest. He stepped out, spun in a circle, and immediately started shouting at an invisible audience. "What is up, guys? We are live from the hidden gem of Washington. Look at this vibe. We are going to be tearing it up all weekend at the Lake Crescent Luxury Lodge." Luxury Lodge. He was standing next to my woodshed. Justin rushed forward, practically bowing. "Welcome, Jax. Welcome, everyone. I am Justin, your host. This is Brittany. We are so excited to have the crew here. Let me get your bags. Please, leave everything. I will bring it in." I watched my nephew, the man who had been too proud to sweep a floor in his father's shop, dragging 5 oversized Louis Vuitton suitcases through the mud. He was sweating already. Brittany was flitting around them like a moth, thrusting champagne flutes into their hands. "Organic orange juice and local sparkling wine," she chirped, her voice an octave higher than normal. "We have a charcuterie spread inside, and the hot tub is heating up right now." Hot tub. Those magic words. One of the girls, a blonde wearing oversized sunglasses and sweatpants that probably cost $300, looked at the house and frowned. "Is the Wi-Fi strong?" she asked, not even saying hello. I need to upload 4K video. If it lags, I am going to freak out. Justin froze. He knew the Wi-Fi was spotty. It was satellite internet, reliable enough for email, not for 10 people live streaming simultaneously. It is fiber optic speeds, Justin lied, his smile tightening. Best in the county. We upgraded just for you guys. I reeled in my lines slowly. Fiber optic. The only fiber in this county was in the diet of the deer. The group moved toward the house. They walked right past the boathouse. Jack stopped and pointed his camera at me. Yo, check out the local color, he said, zooming in on my face. Authentic fisherman vibes. Hey, old-timer, catch anything? I looked at the camera lens. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stared. Not yet, I said, but the big ones are biting today. He laughed, a hollow sound, and turned away, content. I was just a prop to them, a bit of texture for their story. They went inside. The noise level skyrocketed. I could hear them oohing and aahing over the open-concept living room. I heard the sound of suitcase wheels rolling over the new hardwood floors. Then came the sounds I had been waiting for. I shotguns the master bath, someone yelled. I need a shower immediately. The drive was gross, another voice shouted. I sat on the dock and checked my watch. 10:15 a.m. The water usage had begun. I imagined the scene inside the walls, the handles turning, the valves opening. The rush of cold, clear water from the well pump racing through the pipes. One shower started, then a second. I heard the distinct flush of a toilet. The old pipes in the crawl space rattled. Down in the gravel pit, where Mike the plumber had buried the illegal connection, the first trickle of water would be arriving. It would flow easily at first, but these weren't people who took Navy showers. These were people who took 40-minute steams. Justin came running out onto the deck, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked down at me. His face was a mask of panic that he quickly rearranged into arrogance when he saw me watching. "Hey, Wally," he shouted. "Stay out of sight, okay? Jax wants to do a tour of the grounds and we don't need you lurking. Go for a drive or something." "I am fishing, Justin," I said calmly. "Well, fish somewhere else. And hey, if the power flickers, don't touch anything. I have it under control." He didn't have it under control. The loose neutral wire in the panel was already heating up. I could practically hear the insulation melting. Brittany came out behind him. She looked frazzled. "Justin, they all want to use the hot tub at once," she hissed. "Is the water hot?" "It is getting there," he whispered back violently. "Just keep pouring them drinks. Get them drunk. They won't notice the temperature." She nodded and ran back inside. I watched the windows. I saw steam rising from the bathroom vents. They were running hot water. Lots of it. The well pump was cycling continuously. I could hear the hum from the pump house. It was working hard. 10:30 a.m. A girl came out onto the deck in a bikini. She walked to the hot tub, which was bubbling away on its new concrete pad. The pad that was sitting directly on top of the septic drain field. She dipped a toe in. "It is warm," she yelled. "Guys, come on!" 6 people came out. They climbed into the tub. That was 1,000 pounds of water, plus another 1,000 pounds of human weight. 2 tons pressing down on the saturated earth. Displacement. When you press down on a sponge full of water, the water has to go somewhere. The drain field was the sponge, and it was already full from the morning showers. I saw Justin standing by the sliding glass door, watching them with a greedy smile. He was calculating the money. He was thinking about the 5-star review. He was thinking he had pulled it off. He didn't see the ground near the edge of the concrete pad starting to darken. He didn't notice the faint, wet sheen appearing on the grass downhill from the tub. He looked at me one last time. He gave me a thumbs up, a gesture of pure mockery. I nodded back. Enjoy the swim, I thought. I reeled in my line and set the rod down. I picked up my thermos. I wasn't going anywhere. I had a front row ticket to the main event. Inside the house, someone flushed a toilet. Again. And again. The system was loading. The pressure was building. The macerator pumps were grinding, pushing slurry into a tank that was already churning. It was 10:45 a.m. The influencers were live streaming their joy to the world. They were tagging the location. They were telling their followers that this was paradise. They were about to find out that paradise had a plumbing problem. The sun was high now, beating down on the black roof of the cottage, turning the attic into an oven. It was 11 o'clock, the witching hour for plumbing. Inside the house, the brunch prep was in full swing. I could hear the aggressive whir of the commercial espresso machine Justin had installed without upgrading the wiring. It was drawing 20 amps all by itself. Upstairs, 3 showers were running. Downstairs, the powder room door opened and closed like a turnstile at a subway station. I sat on the dock and felt the vibration in the wood planks under my boots. It wasn't the wind. It was the lake pump, struggling to push water against the resistance of 10 open faucets. Then, the sound changed. It started as a deep, subterranean groan, like the earth itself had a stomachache. It vibrated through the ground, a low-frequency tremor that made the water around the dock pilings ripple. Inside the house, the music stopped. I watched the kitchen window. I saw Brittany freeze, a bottle of Prosecco halfway to a glass. She tilted her head, listening. Gurgle. It wasn't a small gurgle. It was the sound of 1,000 gallons of slurry hitting a hydraulic wall. The macerator pumps were pushing, but the tank was full. The drain field was sealed under concrete. The storm drain connection in the crawl space was backed up all the way to the foundation footing. Physics took over. Fluids are incompressible. When you push them and they cannot go forward, they go backward. They seek the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance was the lowest open drain in the house. The shower in the downstairs guest suite. I couldn't see it happen, but I heard it. A scream. Not a happy scream. A scream of primal, visceral disgust. "Oh my God! It is everywhere!" Then, chaos. I saw the front door fly open. A girl in a towel ran out, slipping on the new hardwood floor, crashing into the door frame. She was covered in black sludge. The macerators had done their job too well. They had turned the waste into a fine, pressurized spray. And when the backflow preventer failed, because Justin had bought the cheap plastic ones, that spray erupted from the shower drain like a geyser. But that was just the beginning. Upstairs, the pressure wave hit the master bath, Brittany's sanctuary. The 400-pound stone tub was half full of lavender soak. The drain belched. A bubble of methane gas the size of a beach ball rose to the surface and popped, releasing a stench that hit me all the way down on the dock. Then the toilet in the powder room, the one connected to the storm drain, decided to join the party. I watched through the sliding glass doors. The water in the bowl didn't just rise, it exploded. A fountain of dark, viscous liquid shot 2 feet into the air, coating the expensive wallpaper, the mirror, and the stack of fluffy white towels. It poured out onto the floor. It wasn't just water. It was the accumulated silt and rot from the gravel pit mixed with fresh human waste. It was black gold. The influencers were running. They were scrambling over furniture, trying to get away from the rising tide. And Jax, the boy with the camera? He was a professional. He didn't run. He kept filming. I saw him standing on the kitchen island, holding his camera high, panning across the room. "Yo, guys, you are not going to believe this," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of horror and excitement. "The house is literally exploding with poop. This is insane. #luxury fail. #poop apocalypse." Justin was running in circles. He grabbed a pile of towels and threw them on the floor, trying to stem the tide. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a napkin. The black sludge soaked through the towels in seconds and kept spreading. It seeped into the baseboards. It ran into the heating vents. The smell hit the deck a moment later. It was thick, heavy, and hot. It smelled of sulfur and bad decisions. The guests outside by the hot tub stopped laughing. They covered their noses. "What is that smell?" someone gagged. Then they looked down. The grass around the hot tub pad was bubbling. The ground was saturated. The sheer weight of the water and the people had squeezed the earth like a sponge, forcing the trapped effluent from the old drain field up to the surface. Brown liquid began to ooze over the pristine white concrete of the patio. It pooled around their bare feet. "Ew, what is that? It's warm." Screams, panic, people scrambling out of the hot tub, slipping on the slime, falling into the muck. It was a total system failure, inside and out, above and below. I reeled in my line. I checked the bait. The worm was gone. I opened my tackle box and selected a new one, a nice, fat nightcrawler. I heard heavy footsteps pounding down the wooden stairs from the deck. "Wally! Wally!" It was Justin. He was sprinting toward the dock. His white linen shirt was stained. He had lost a shoe in the mud. His eyes were wide, wild, terrifyingly white against his red face. He skidded to a halt at the edge of the dock, breathing hard, his chest heaving. "You have to do something," he screamed. "The pipes! They exploded! There is shit everywhere! Do something!" I looked at him. I hooked the worm carefully, piercing it twice to keep it secure. "Hello, Justin," I said calmly. "How is the opening going?" "Are you insane?" he shrieked, grabbing his hair. "The house is ruined. The guests are freaking out. Jax is live streaming it to 2 million people. Fix it. You know this house. Turn it off." "Turn what off?" I asked, casting my line into the water. The sinker made a gentle plop. "The water! The poop! I don't know! Make it stop!" I set the rod down and picked up my thermos. I poured a cup of coffee. Steam rose from the cup, clean and fragrant, a stark contrast to the cloud of stench drifting down the hill. "I cannot fix physics, Justin," I said. "I told you. The system was designed for 2 people. You put 12 on it. You added high-pressure pumps. You covered the drain field with concrete. You cut down the trees that absorbed the groundwater." I took a sip. "You pressurized a closed system that was already at capacity. You created a bomb, son. And then you flushed the detonator." Justin stared at me. His mouth opened and closed. He looked back at the house. Black liquid was now flowing out from under the front door, cascading down the porch steps like a waterfall of crude oil. "But," the plumber said. He stammered. "The plumber you bribed?" I asked. "The one who tied your toilet into the storm drain?" "Yeah, about that. You know storm drains aren't sealed, right? They are perforated. That sewage isn't just on the floor. It is in the foundation. It is soaking into the structural wood. Your house is essentially a biohazard container now." Justin fell to his knees. He put his head in his hands. "I am dead," he whispered. "I am so dead. The investors, the loans." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Uncle Wally, please, you have to help me. I don't have the money to fix this. I don't have insurance for this. They said it was negligence." I looked at him. I saw the boy I used to take for ice cream. I saw the teenager I taught to drive. And then I saw the man who told me I could sleep in a shed. I stood up. I walked over to him. I leaned down until my face was inches from his. "You are right, Justin. It is negligence. Criminal negligence. And do you know what the best part is?" He stared at me, tears streaking the dirt on his face. "The best part is that you signed the management agreement," I whispered. "You took full legal responsibility for all maintenance and structural modifications. You wanted to be the boss. You wanted the title." I patted him on the cheek. "Congratulations. You own the shit. Literally." A siren wailed in the distance, then another. They were getting closer, fast. Justin turned his head toward the road. "Who is that?" he asked, his voice trembling. I checked my watch. 11:15 a.m. Right on time. "That would be the cavalry," I said. I picked up my fishing rod. "Or the executioners, depending on how you look at it." The sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees, reflecting off the surface of the lake. Justin scrambled to his feet. He looked at the house, then at the road, then at me. "You called them," he accused. "You called the cops." "No," I said. "I called my fishing buddy, and the county inspector, and the EPA." The first car tore down the driveway, splashing through the puddles. It was a sheriff's cruiser. "Captain?" Miller stepped out, adjusting his belt. He looked at the house. He looked at the sewage flowing down the driveway. He pulled his radio from his shoulder. Then a second vehicle arrived, a white truck with the county seal on the door. Code enforcement. And finally, a third truck. This one was green. Department of Ecology. Justin stood frozen on the dock. He looked small. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and realized he couldn't hide the pieces. "Go on, Justin," I said, pointing toward the driveway with my coffee cup. "Go greet your guests. You are the host, remember?" He didn't move. "Go!" I barked, my voice cracking like a whip. He flinched. He turned and ran. He ran toward the house, toward the screaming influencers, toward the police, toward the ruin of his life. I watched him go. I watched him slip in the mud, fall, scramble up, and keep running. I sat back down. I reeled in my line again. The bait was gone. "Fish are hungry today," I said to the empty air. Up at the house, I saw Miller talking to Justin. I saw the code enforcement officer taking photos of the black water pouring off the porch. I saw Brittany trying to wipe sludge off her legs with a designer scarf, screaming at a police officer who was trying to keep her back. It was a masterpiece. a symphony of consequences. I poured the last of my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted sweet. The house was destroyed. The floors were gone. The walls were soaked. The furniture was ruined. But the house could be fixed. Wood can be replaced. Drywall can be hung. But Justin? He was broken in a way that couldn't be repaired. I took a deep breath of the air. It smelled terrible. It smelled of sewage and disaster. But underneath that, if you paid attention, you could smell the faint, clean scent of the cedar trees that used to stand on the bank. They were gone, but their roots were still there, deep in the earth, waiting, just like me. The blue lights of the sheriff's cruiser reflected off the black sludge pooling in the driveway, creating a disco effect that was appropriate for the nightmare unfolding before us. It was a carnival of errors, and the ride had just come to a screeching, grinding halt. I watched from my perch on the dock as Captain Miller slammed his car door shut. He didn't rush. Miller never rushed. He adjusted his belt, hitched up his pants, and walked straight into the muck. He was wearing his heavy-duty rubber boots. He knew exactly what kind of call this was. Behind him, the code enforcement truck door opened. Out stepped Inspector Graves. I knew Graves. He was a man who measured his life in code violations and setbacks. He had zero sense of humor, and even less patience for city boys who thought zoning laws were optional. He carried a clipboard like a weapon. Justin ran toward them, slipping and sliding in the filth he had created. He looked like a man who had been tarred and was waiting for the feathers. "Officer!" Justin screamed, waving his arms frantically. "Thank God! You have to arrest him!" He pointed a trembling finger at me. "He sabotaged the house! He broke the pipes! Look at this! My investors are here! This is domestic terrorism!" Miller stopped. He looked at Justin. He looked at the sewage coating Justin's expensive Italian loafers. He looked at the influencers who were huddled by the van, retching and live-streaming the arrival of the police. "Son," Miller said, his voice deep and calm, "the only terrorism I see here is what you have done to your own drain field. Step back." "But he did it!" Justin shrieked. "He is senile! He is crazy!" Miller ignored him. He walked over to where the black water was bubbling up from the ground near the foundation. He squatted down, careful not to touch anything. He looked at the color. He smelled the air. He stood up and nodded to Graves. "It is raw," Miller said. "Looks like a total containment failure." Graves walked over. He didn't look at the house. He looked at the ground. He walked to the spot where I had filmed Mike the plumber burying the pipe 2 days ago. The earth there was soft, saturated, and heaving. Graves pulled a collapsible shovel from his truck bed. He took one step, drove the shovel into the mud, and leveraged it back. A geyser of brown water shot up. The connection to the storm drain had blown completely. Graves looked at the PVC pipe visible in the mud. He looked at the path it took toward the gravel pit. He looked at the lake, 50 yards away, where a brown plume was already spreading into the clear water. He pulled a red tag from his pocket, a big, bright red sticker that meant, "Stop work immediately. Do not enter. Condemned." He walked up the steps, stepping over the sludge, and slapped the sticker onto the brand-new frosted glass front door. "Building condemned," Graves announced, his voice flat. "Immediate evacuation ordered. This structure is a biohazard. Unsanitary conditions. Illegal discharge of untreated sewage into a critical waterway." Justin ran up the stairs, grabbing Graves's arm. "You can't do that. We have guests. This is a grand opening." Graves shook him off. "You have 10 minutes to clear the premises," Graves said, "or I will have the sheriff remove you." Then Graves turned his attention to the rest of the property. He looked at the stumps where the ancient cedars used to be. He looked at the concrete pad for the hot tub that was now sinking into the liquefied earth. "Who authorized the removal of this vegetation?" Graves asked, pointing his pen at the jagged stumps. Justin froze. He looked at the stumps. He looked at me. He saw an opening. "He did!" Justin shouted, pointing at me again. "He is the owner. It is his land. He told the contractors to cut them. I tried to stop him." I stood up. I picked up my thermos. I walked slowly up the dock, the wood thumping under my boots. I stopped 10 feet away from them, on clean ground. "Hello, Miller," I said. "Hello, Graves." "Wally," Miller nodded. "Looks like you have a bit of a plumbing issue." "A bit," I agreed. "This is his fault," Justin yelled, his eyes bulging. "He owns the land. I just manage the business. He is liable for the trees. He is liable for the pipes. Fine him! Arrest him!" I looked at Justin. I looked at the desperation radiating off him like heat waves. He thought he had found a loophole. He thought that because his name wasn't on the deed, he could walk away from the mess. I reached into my vest pocket. I pulled out my phone. I opened the photo gallery. I scrolled to the picture I had taken 3 days ago, the picture of the property management agreement Justin had forced me to sign. "Inspector," I said, holding the phone out, "you might want to see this." Graves stepped closer. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the screen. I read the relevant clause aloud, my voice carrying over the sound of the sobbing influencers. Clause 4, Section B. The manager, Justin King, assumes sole and exclusive responsibility for all vegetative management, landscaping, structural modifications, and utility maintenance. The manager agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the owner from any liability resulting from renovations, alterations, or code violations occurring during the tenure of this agreement. I swiped to the next photo, the signature page. Justin's signature was bold, arrogant, sprawling. "And here," I continued, "is where he signed it. He was very insistent. He said he wanted exclusive rights." I looked at Justin. His face had gone the color of old milk. "You wrote that contract, Justin," I said softly. "You copy-pasted it from the internet because you wanted total control. You wanted to make sure I couldn't stop you from cutting those trees. You wanted to make sure I couldn't stop you from building that patio." I put the phone back in my pocket. "You assumed liability, son. You assumed it in writing." Graves looked at Justin. He pulled a citation book from his pocket. It was a thick book. "Mr. King," Graves said, writing furiously, "I am citing you for 3 counts of illegal removal of protected vegetation in a critical buffer zone. That is $10,000 per tree. I am citing you for installation of unpermitted plumbing fixtures. I am citing you for illegal discharge of sewage. And I am referring this case to the Department of Ecology for the water contamination. The fines for that start at $50,000. $50,000, Justin whispered. Per day, Graves clarified, until the remediation is complete. Justin staggered back. He hit the railing of the deck, the railing that wasn't bolted down correctly. It wobbled dangerously. But the hard money loan, he stammered. The collateral is worthless, Miller finished for him. You cannot collateralize a condemned building, son. And since you just admitted to being the project manager who ordered the work, I imagine your lender is going to want a word with you about fraud. Brittany, who had been hiding behind one of the influencers, suddenly stepped forward. She looked at the sewage on her shoes. She looked at the red tag on the door. She looked at Justin. "You told me you had permits," she screamed at him. "You told me you handled it." "I handled it," Justin yelled back, his voice cracking. "I improvised." "Improvised?" She threw her hands up. "You improvised us into a felony, Justin." She turned to Miller. "I didn't do anything. I just picked the paint colors. This was all him. He signed the papers. He hired the plumber." Ah, marital bliss, I thought. It breaks so easily under the weight of a federal investigation. Graves tore the citations out of his book. He handed the stack to Justin. It was heavy. "You have 30 days to pay or contest," Graves said. "But the remediation order is immediate. You have 24 hours to hire a certified hazardous waste cleanup crew to pump this site. If you don't, the county will do it and bill you triple." "I don't have the money," Justin whispered. "I spent it all." "Then I suggest you start selling things," Miller said. "Starting with that van." He pointed to the Mercedes Sprinter. The influencers were already dragging their luggage out of it, trying to load into an Uber that had just pulled up at the top of the driveway. They weren't waiting for Justin. They were fleeing the scene of the content crime. Miller turned to me. "Wally, you can't stay here either. Not until the tag is lifted. Do you have a place to go?" I nodded. "I have a motel room in town," I said. "I booked it 2 days ago." Miller smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Good thinking." He turned back to Justin. "Get off the property, son. Now." Justin looked at the house one last time. He looked at the ruin of his dream. The white paint was splattered with mud. The deck was warping. The hot tub was tilting into the earth like the Titanic. He looked at me. His eyes were full of hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. "You knew," he hissed. "You knew the pipes wouldn't hold. You knew about the trees. You watched me do it." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The contract said it all. The manager assumes sole responsibility. He had wanted to be the man in charge. He had wanted to show the old man how business was done. Well, business was concluded. Justin turned and walked toward his Range Rover. Brittany was already in the passenger seat, on the phone, probably calling a divorce lawyer or her mother. I watched him get in. I watched him slam the door. I watched him rev the engine. He put it in reverse. He backed up aggressively, his tires spinning in the mud. He was leaving. He was running away. But he wasn't going far, because I had one more surprise. I watched his taillights disappear up the winding driveway toward the main road. I waited for the brake lights. I waited for the realization. He was about to discover that while he might have temporarily occupied the house, he had never, ever owned the road. I looked at Miller. "Sheriff," I said, "I think there might be a traffic obstruction up at the county line easement. You might want to check it out." Miller tipped his hat. "I will do that, Wally." He walked back to his cruiser. Graves followed. I stood alone in the stench of victory. It smelled terrible, but it felt clean. I walked to my truck. I had my bag packed. I had my fishing rods. I drove slowly up the driveway. I wanted to see the look on Justin's face when he realized he was trapped. I wanted to see the moment he understood that the game wasn't over just because the whistle blew. The game was over when I said it was over, and I wasn't done playing. I drove my old Ford truck up the winding gravel track, keeping a steady pace. Ahead of me, the aggressive red taillights of Justin's Range Rover cut through the dust. He was driving fast, too fast for a dirt road, desperate to put distance between himself and the disaster he had engineered. He probably thought he was heading for the highway, for the city, for a lawyer who could spin this nightmare into a victim impact statement. He probably thought the worst was over. He was wrong. The worst was just sitting there, waiting for him around the final bend. I saw his brake lights flare, bright, angry red. The SUV skidded, fishtailing slightly in the loose gravel before coming to a complete, dust-choking halt. I pulled up 10 yards behind him and killed the engine. The silence of the woods returned, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the frantic revving of an engine going nowhere. I stepped out of my truck. I walked slowly toward the Range Rover. Justin was already out of the driver's seat. He was standing in the middle of the road, screaming at a pile of rocks. And it wasn't just a pile. It was a mountain. 10 tons of jagged quarry spalls, the kind used for heavy-duty road base, dumped precisely across the narrowest point of the easement, right where the driveway passed between two steep embankments. There was no way around it. Not on the left, where the ditch dropped 4 feet. Not on the right, where the dense forest wall began. A bright yellow dump truck was just pulling away on the far side of the pile, its work done. I raised a hand in thanks to the driver, Old Man Henderson, who owed me a favor from a zoning dispute back in '95. He honked once and rumbled away toward the county road. Justin spun around when he heard my boots crunching on the gravel. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "What is this?" he shrieked, gesturing wildly at the barricade. "What did you do? Move it! I have to leave!" I leaned against the hood of my truck and crossed my arms. I took a moment to appreciate the scene. The expensive SUV trapped like a rat in a maze. Brittany in the passenger seat, hammering on the glass. The Uber van behind them, filled with terrified influencers who just wanted to go home. "I cannot move it, Justin," I said calmly. "That is structural fill. I am repairing the road grade. It has been washing out lately." "You are repairing it now?" he screamed, veins bulging in his neck. "Right now? In the middle of an evacuation? Get a tractor. Push it aside." "I don't have a tractor," I said. "And even if I did, I wouldn't move it. That gravel cost me $500. It needs to settle." He marched toward me, his fists clenched. For a second, I thought he might swing at me. I almost hoped he would. Captain Miller was still down at the house, filling out paperwork. Assaulting a senior citizen would be a nice cherry on top of his legal sundae. "Listen to me, you old lunatic," Justin hissed, stopping inches from my face. "This is illegal imprisonment. You cannot block a public access road. I will call the cops back here and have you arrested for kidnapping." I laughed. It was a dry, dusty sound. "Kidnapping?" I asked. "You are free to walk, son. Climb over the pile. Walk to the highway. It is only 4 miles. But your car? That stays here." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my flannel shirt pocket. It was soft with age, the creases worn white. It was a copy of the original plat map from 1950, the one my father had drawn up when he bought the land. "You seem to be confused about the geography, Justin," I said, unfolding the map on the hood of my truck. "You spent so much time trying to steal the house, you forgot to check what the house was sitting on." I pointed a calloused finger at the square marking the cottage. "This is Lot 42, I explained, tapping the paper. "This is the land that was in the family trust. This is the land your mother signed over to you. This is the land you currently hold the title to, assuming your fraudulent paperwork holds up for another 24 hours. I slid my finger down the page, tracing the long, thin strip of land that connected Lot 42 to the county highway. But this driveway? This is Lot 42B. I looked up at him. His eyes were locked on the map, darting back and forth, trying to find the flaw in my logic. Lot 42B was never in the trust, I continued, my voice hardening. My father bought this strip separately from the timber company in 1952 because the original access was by boat only. He deeded this specific parcel directly to me when I turned 18, not to the family. To me, Wallace Henry King, sole owner, fee simple. Justin stepped back, shaking his head. "No," he stammered. That is an easement. It is an implied easement of necessity. You cannot landlock a property. A judge would throw that out in a second." I smiled. He knew just enough real estate law to be dangerous, but not enough to be right. "Normally you would be correct," I admitted. "The law usually grants an easement of necessity if a property is landlocked. But there is a catch, Justin. There is always a catch." I tapped the map again. Easements are granted for reasonable use consistent with the historical purpose of the property. This road was established for a single-family residential cottage. 1 car, maybe 2. I gestured to the Uber van, the delivery trucks that had churned up the mud, and his own massive SUV. "You changed the use, Justin. You turned a residence into a commercial hotel. You brought in heavy commercial traffic. You degraded the road surface." In Washington state, unilaterally expanding the scope of an easement to commercial use without the servient estate owner's permission is grounds for revocation. I folded the map and put it back in my pocket. I am the servient estate owner, and I am revoking your permission. You are trespassing on my private land, and since you have damaged my road with your commercial vehicles, I have closed it for emergency repairs. Brittany rolled down the window of the Range Rover. "What is going on?" she screamed. "Why aren't we moving?" Justin turned to her, his face pale. He looked back at me. He looked at the pile of rocks. He realized, finally, the geometry of his trap. He owned a house he couldn't live in. He was stuck on a road he didn't own. And behind him, down the hill, was a biological disaster zone that was currently accruing fines at the rate of $50,000 a day. "So we're trapped?" he whispered. "You are trapping us here? With the sewage?" I picked up a small rock from the road and tossed it into the woods. "You are not trapped," I repeated. "You can walk, but no vehicles cross this line until I say so. And right now, I don't feel like saying so." The driver of the Uber van got out. He was a big man, and he looked unhappy. He walked up to us, ignoring Justin, and looked at the pile of rocks. "Hey, buddy," he said to me. "I got passengers. I got a schedule. You gonna move this?" I looked at the driver. "I cannot," I said. "It is a construction zone. Insurance liability. But you are welcome to turn around and wait down by the lake. I hear the view is breathtaking, apart from the smell." The driver turned to Justin. "You told me this was a paved road, man. You told me it was clear. I am charging you waiting time, and if I get stuck in this mud, you were buying me a new transmission." Justin looked like he was going to vomit. He fumbled for his wallet, but I knew it was empty. "Uncle Wally, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "Just let us go. I will sign whatever you want. I will tear up the quitclaim. I will give it all back. Just let me drive out of here." I looked at him. I saw the fear. It was real this time, but it was the fear of consequences, not the fear of conscience. It is too late for signatures, Justin, I said. The county has already red-tagged the building. The EPA is already opening a file. You cannot give it back because you broke it. You broke the land. You broke the house. You broke the trust. I turned and walked toward my truck. I am going into town to stay at the motel, I said over my shoulder. I suggest you start walking. It is going to be a cold night. And Justin? He looked up, tears streaming down his face. Don't try to move those rocks by hand, I warned. They are sharp. You might hurt your hands. And you are going to need those hands to fill out the bankruptcy forms. I climbed into my truck. I put it in reverse. I backed down the road about 50 feet to a turnaround I had cut into the bank years ago. Another feature of my private land that Justin hadn't noticed. I swung the truck around and drove away, heading toward the back service road that only the utility companies and the owner of Lot 42B knew existed. It was a narrow track, overgrown with blackberries, but my truck could handle it. I watched in the rearview mirror as Justin kicked the tire of his Range Rover. I saw Brittany get out and throw her phone into the woods. I saw the influencers huddled together, realizing that their luxury getaway had just turned into a survival reality show. They were stuck on an island of their own making, surrounded by a moat of sewage and silence. I turned onto the main highway and accelerated. The air rushing through the open window felt clean. I didn't turn on the radio. I just listened to the hum of the tires on the asphalt. I was homeless. My house was condemned. My family was at war. But as I drove toward town, I felt lighter than I had in years. I had defended my ground. I had held the line. And tomorrow, when the dust settled, I would start the process of buying back my house at the foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. Because that is how you really flip a property. You wait for the amateur to drop it, and then you pick up the pieces. It took exactly 30 days for the silence to return to Lake Crescent. I spent those weeks in a motel room watching the collapse of my nephew's life through the local news and the legal updates from Prescott. It was a slow, controlled demolition, much like the one he had tried to perform on my home. Justin never made it off the property that night. The hard money lender filed criminal fraud charges the next morning, alleging that Justin had falsified title documents to secure the loan. When the deputies returned to serve the warrant, they found him sitting on the hood of his mud-caked Range Rover, staring at the pile of rocks blocking his exit. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just held out his hands for the cuffs. He is currently awaiting trial on federal wire fraud and state environmental charges. His lawyer says he is looking at 5 years minimum. Brittany didn't wait for the handcuffs. The influencers live-streamed her departure. She climbed over my rock pile, dragging her Louis Vuitton suitcase through the dirt, leaving her husband behind without a backward glance. She filed for an annulment 3 days later, citing fraud. I heard she is back in the city looking for a new investment. As for the cottage, it went to foreclosure auction faster than anyone expected. The hard money lender wanted out. They wanted to dump the toxic asset, but nobody wanted to buy a property that was red-tagged by the county, condemned by the health department, and carried a $50,000 daily EPA fine. Nobody except me. I bought my house back on the courthouse steps for pennies on the dollar. I used the settlement money from Justin's liability insurance to pay the fines. I used the proceeds from the auction of his seized SUV to pay for the remediation. It took 2 weeks to pump the sewage out of the crawl space. It took another week to rip out the warped hardwood floors and the moldy drywall. I burned the white rental furniture in a massive bonfire on the beach. I watched the velvet sectional turn to ash and felt the weight of the last month lift off my shoulders with the smoke. Yesterday, the nursery truck arrived. I didn't order Japanese maples. I ordered 3 semi-mature western red cedars. They aren't as big as the ones he cut down. Those trees took 300 years to grow, and you cannot buy time. But these new ones are strong. Their roots will hold. I planted them myself. I dug the holes deep into the earth, mixing the soil with compost. I packed the dirt down with my boots, sweating in the cool air. When I was done, I watered them from the lake. They will grow. They will outlast me. This morning, the sun rose over the mountains, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. I walked down to the dock, my boots thumping on the wood. The air smelled of pine needles and wet earth, clean and sharp. I sat on the edge of the dock and poured a cup of coffee from my old battered thermos. The steam curled up into the cold air. Behind me, the house was gutted, empty and quiet. The smart lock was gone, replaced by my old brass key. The internet was disconnected. The hot tub had been hauled away for scrap. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, and perfect. A bald eagle screeched overhead, circling the thermals looking for breakfast. The water lapped gently against the pilings. I looked at the spot where the old cedar used to be. The new sapling was standing there, its branches swaying in the breeze. "We made it, Patricia," I whispered to the morning air. "The view is clear." I sat there for a long time, watching the light change on the water. I was 72 years old. I had a house that needed a lot of work, a bad knee, and a quiet life. And I wouldn't trade it for all the gold in the world. My nephew thought that because I was old, I was obsolete. He believed that a coat of white paint and a high-interest loan could replace 40 years of understanding the land. That was his fatal mistake. He saw a property to exploit. I saw a home to protect. He learned the hard way that you cannot build a future by destroying the foundation of the past. Greed blinds you to the warning signs, and in life, the devil is always in the details. Never underestimate the person who built the ground you are standing on. If you enjoyed watching karma do its dirty work, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served cold.